Alrighty, good morning everyone. We seem to have a problem with YouTube today. Internet's working, but YouTube doesn't want to go live. So we're not too sure what the issue is. So we're doing this recording that we're just going to pop up a little bit later.
Yeah.
Tori's going to put a post up so people will know. Anyway, good morning and welcome to Sunday morning. Beautiful day out here in Durban. We've had so much rain the last 2 weeks of intense flooding in our area. But today, at least, my pool is back to normal, which is already a good step in the right direction.
If the pool is fine, all is fine.
Life is fine. It was a little bit hectic a while ago, a couple of days ago, but anyway, we've got it back to normal. Right, so if you are joining us today, and as you can see, it's a little bit windy, but today we are interrupting, putting on pause our study on Corinthians because we're about to embrace or to embark on a journey. At the end of January, we're going to be doing a Facebook study called Rediscovering the Beauty of the Gospels. And so this morning, what we're going to be using today's session to do an introductory session to that study. The study will be running in a Facebook group, and there will be live sessions. They'll be on Wednesday nights, but the sessions that go live will be recorded, so anyone can watch them afterwards. But you have to be part of the Facebook group to be part of the study. So I'll put a link in the description of this video. If you'd like to check it out, you're very welcome to do so. And then the week after, next week, we'll be back on Corinthians for these normal YouTube sessions. All right, so Tori's busy putting up there, and now she's got my notes with her. So let me just give you just a quick intro on what this study is about. So the study is called The Beauty and Rediscovering the Beauty of the Gospels. Why would I do a study like this? I've been a pastor for, it'll be 20 years in June, and I've been reading the Gospels all my life. Before that, I was a pastor's kid, and so I've been hearing the Gospels all my life. So it's a strange thing to do, to after 20 years of intense study to come back and re-looking at the Gospels. But I've had the privilege over the last 4 years, really since COVID, to get to a place where I could really sit back and really re-look at all the things, especially scripturally, that make up. What's wrong there?
Sorry, I don't know Facebook. I don't know how to post it. I've tapped it out and I don't know it doesn't show where to post.
Okay. All right. So after so many years, I had the privilege of. Can you get back to my notes when you're done? Yeah. Privilege of getting the time and the luxury of the time to go back and re-look at a lot of things that really were foundational to my Christian understanding. And so I started a very long journey looking at different perspectives on the gospel. And the one that really I found a lot of interest in was the historical literary studies of not only the New Testament but also the Old Testament. Re-looking at them, and I realized, and the fundamental realization I came to is that a lot of the things I understand, the way I understand them, is as a result from the Gospels, but they've gone through a machine called my tradition. And the end product that came out the machine is what I held to so strongly, but I've come to realize that some of the stuff the Gospels themselves don't have, and you have to put it through the process of Christianity for it to come out the way we like it. And that's quite an unnerving position to find yourself in, and that just made me research harder and read more and try and understand the best I can. So this study is kind of a result of that journey. So what we've chosen to do is to go to an Oxford Press University textbook on the New Testament. And we're going to be dealing with the portion that has the New Testament Gospels as their focus. And so what we're going to be doing in the study is like kind of just walk slowly through this to kind of open up a new understanding of what the Gospels really is. Okay, I've got my notes back. So I've said some of these things. Let me just get into this. Even when we, in your pastors and people who have theological degrees, you go to a university or you go to a seminary, most of them, and they go do a degree in theology. But what they get at the theological school is an apologetic perspective, which is the perspective that affirms what they believe. And many get a little bit upset when they go to university, because what you get at university is a more neutral perspective that does not necessarily honor your particular denomination's views, beliefs, and understanding. And so the idea with a historical literary study is to kind of put denominational ideas aside, like the dogmatic, the overly dogmatic ideas aside, and go back to the text itself. And it's quite strange, because as Christians, we believe that the text is sacred, but yet somehow we've moved on from the text in our tradition.
Yeah.
And this you only realize when you undertake a study like this. Before I undertook this type of journey, I believe that the things I held as understanding and beliefs and dogmas, they are exactly the way the New Testament puts them forth. And I've come to realize with some shock that it isn't exactly like that. I have to leave a little bit of space for what my tradition particularly, was Protestant Pentecostal in essence. I have to leave some space for the movements and the ideas that my tradition, I wouldn't use inserted, but built upon the original Gospels. So in the study, we want to tear off and almost just put aside, if you're a Pentecostal or you're a charismatic or an evangelical or whatever, even if you're not a Christian or you're a Catholic or whatever you are, you have to put aside slightly your own strong beliefs just to the side, just momentarily as well.
Yeah.
You can grab onto them again. But for this study, we want to look at the text in their most naked state and just see how can that inform and help us maybe reorientate the way that we look at the Gospels, even possibly the way that we look at Jesus. All right. So very few Christians I personally know has ever undertaken this study. In my circles, no, because it's a little bit of a daring process, a little bit of it's a challenge.
Risky.
It's a real challenge, because you are going to be confronted in this study with some ideas that you might not like, that you might not hold to, and that's okay. You don't have to believe everything that scholarly work brings up, but it's good to have it in your arsenal. It's good to know what scholars that spend their lives really studying the literary side, the historical side of these Gospels, what their arguments are. If you're ever going to be finding yourself in a debating type of situation with some of these guys and you haven't prepared yourself and you don't know what they see and how they see it and how they come to their conclusions, you're going to find yourself in very, very deep waters.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I find myself, because I realize that my view of the Gospels is kind of just like a combination. I just squash all of them together and I have this view in my head of what they say. And when I looked at them individually, I could see that they were quite different. Okay, so we're going to be on the thing that is mostly addressed in this study. Really, and comes to light is our own biases. All right, so we all have a confirmation bias. What this is the notion or the instinct to grab onto evidence that confirm the things we already believe, and we kind of subconsciously overlook evidences that don't affirm what we believe. So that's the reason why someone like Chrissy and Yanni can read the same exact verse and come out with completely different understandings of that verse. And that's why we have so many Christian denominations. It's because we grab onto the evidences that confirm what we already believe. And this is not only true of theology and the way that we approach the scripture, it's true in your marriage, it's true in your view of the world, it's true in your view of yourself. We tend to grab onto that which proves what we already believe. So this study is going to challenge you to now face some of the things that you might not believe or that you might not have considered before. And in that way, it's slightly challenging. Our instinctive confirmation bias kicks in, and all the data points we notice when we read or study confirms what we already believe. And this is natural, this is human. We confirm our tradition, our perspective, our denominational beliefs. And this is also evident in that most of us read the books. If I ask you, what books have you read lately? you most often read, if you're reading Christian books, you're reading the books that affirm what you already believe.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to sometimes read books that don't necessarily fall within your specific tradition. So most of apologetics, and I'm using the word apologetics, it simply just means someone that reads or writes with the idea to defend a current belief or a current dogma. Most of apologetics are based on already having a set of predisposition beliefs about the Gospels. And for instance, the belief that all the Gospels say the same thing just from different angles or perspectives is something that is almost a non-negotiable given for most of the Christians I know. And this study will kind of challenge that view and show why it's most probably not the case. Okay, so this study will not be conducted from. Sorry, let me just go up on. Stepping outside of this box can be extremely challenging and very daunting. It's an experience or a prospect that can really send chills down the spine of people who have always seen things a certain way, and you might have to fight off those fears as we journey through the study. So obviously, one thing you need to know if you're intending on going through the study and walking through it with us, so this study will not be conducted from an apologetic viewpoint. In other words, it's not going to take on the view of any particular denomination or group. It's not going to be Catholic. It's not going to be Pentecostal. It's not going to be Protestant. That's the whole point, is to try and look at the scriptures, the Gospels, from a neutral perspective. Now, I say try and attempt because it's theoretically completely impossible. But it is possible to be more neutral and more objective than what you used to be.
Would you call it historic?
Yes, historic, and I'm going to explain that in a moment. The historic approach is a more objective and a more neutral approach that you'll be following. So we're going to be following a perspective that is way more free of traditions and dogma by focusing on the text, right? So we're not going to be reading a text and say, yes, but what Jesus meant. We're not going to be doing that. And we're also not going to be saying, yes, but John says, when we're reading Matthew. Because we're going to assume, because we're going to be historians, we're going to assume that Matthew wrote what he believed, not knowing that there'll ever be a John. So Matthew didn't have that safety net that we often use today. Okay, so you're going to often hear the term scholarly consensus, and what this is it's the same type of thing that you find in science. When a theory is out, scientists propose hypotheses, and they start testing, and then eventually they write papers, and the papers are peer-reviewed by other scientists. It's criticized, it's praised, and this is the process of coming up with eventually a theory that reaches a sense of scholarly consensus. And what that means is not that all scholars necessarily agree, but it would mean that most of the scholars or most of the scientists believe that gravity works like this, right? So in the theological world, there's also scholarly consensus on things, simple things, like what book was written first. That doesn't mean that everybody believes it. It doesn't even believe that your church group believes it. It just means that after many years of in-depth scholarly research, data looking, working through the texts, most of the scholars have concluded that this book was written before that book, right? So it's based not on what people said or what the church says, but it wants to look at the data. When it's looking at, for instance, who wrote the book of Mark, it is not going to depend on what people said who wrote the book of Mark. It's going to look into the book of Mark to see if it's possible that Mark wrote the book, right? Okay, so essentially, the material we'll cover in this study is going to follow general scholarly consensus. It's a university textbook. So if you had to take up a course at university on the New Testament, this is what you're going to encounter, right? Not a seminary, because a seminary is going to be apologetic in nature. It's going to defend its viewpoints. Yeah. Okay. So we'll be following the general scholarly consensus on the literary format and the structures of the Gospels. In other words, even a non-believer or a person from another religion can do the study with us. And the reason for that is it's not going to try and convince people to believe a specific thing or come to dogmatic or theological conclusions or intentions. That's not the point of the study. The point of the study is more to clearly understand what each writer was writing about, what possibly their intentions could have been, and the relationship between the Gospels. And we do that by comparing the Gospels, and this is going to be a big part of what we'll be doing. Essentially, this is to some degree an intellectual study of the Gospels, and I think that's probably possibly the best way to put that, and you shouldn't be put off by that term. It's not for clever people. This really, I believe, is for Christians. I really believe it's for people that want to understand their Bible better, but you're going to have to rely on your understanding. You're going to have to rely on your ability to think about the problem. And at least for this study, put on hold the things you were told to believe necessarily and look at what it actually says over what people have told us it says. So that's what's going on there. Right. So why do we spend the time doing this? I believe that the knowledge you can gain from this type of study will help you to inform you in which way to read and interpret the New Testament Gospels, which ultimately for Christians, that affects how we believe and how we live. So it's foundational, it's challenging, and I believe it's absolutely imperative. All right, I want to speak about something I call leaving the dogmatic hat alone. At home. Christianity has over many centuries developed many versions of the correct interpretation of the Gospels, right? And if you go into each one of these denominations, you'll find the differences there. There's a plethora of denominations that can attest to this fact. We have all more or less the same scripture, but our belief can vary quite widely, and that's because we interpret things differently. Question is always who has the right version, and the answer is always we do. We have the right version. Now, this study does not endeavor to solve this problem, who has the right version of the Gospels or the right interpretation, but rather it is to make it obvious to us that we ourselves actually hold a particular version, a particular interpretation, and to kind of stand outside of that and to look in on our particular version or interpretation and to see it as one amongst many. And in that way you open your eyes, because as long as you believe whatever you have is it, you're never able to see beyond that. You can't really think critically about what you believe. Okay. We're gonna try to make it obvious that we ourselves hold to a particular version of these traditions and interpretations, and it's also going to help us to look at the Gospels again without those traditions, even if it's just for the length of the study. And once you've looked at it and heard the intellectual arguments, then you can say, okay, how do I integrate this with what I believe and how I interpret? And then many of you might go back to the exact same view of the scriptures or of the Gospels. Some might not, and that's up to the individual. I like to think of the best way of engaging a study like this would be to kind of change hats. Yeah. As Christians, we tend to wear a dogmatic hat. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is that we tend to hold dogma above reason or above critically thinking about what we believe. This is kind of part of our DNA to some degree. Faith was described to us like this, like faith is what do you believe, and that determines everything. So for this study, what we're trying to do is just to take off the dogmatic hat for a little while, things that you believe as interpretations of the Bible, and put on the historian's hat. So the historian hat it has a different perspective. It comes from a completely different angle. It asks, what can we find evidence for? What can we, and we're not really going to be spending our time in the external evidence. Most of our time is going to be spent on the internal evidence of the Gospels themselves. So that's valuable for us as Christians, because we believe that to some degree everybody believes that this is the Word of God. This is sacred writings that are inspired, and so if they've been inspired in a particular way, then not my interpretation is that important of them. It's what they're actually saying to us. So we want to go back to try and get back to that level. This would be an approach to the Gospels that is fresh and working with the text itself to learn more about the authors, about their writings, about their intentions, and also about the differences between the books. Right. This is not an easy task. It's not a trivial task at all. And at times you might find yourself conflicted between the dogmatic hat and the historian hat. And then you know you're at a good place. Then you know you're doing the study right. Because the moment you feel that conflict, it means you've put the historical hat on and you've put the dogmatic hat down for a while, at least for a while. Okay. So this would mean to approach from fresh. Sorry, I said that almost approaching them as if you are someone who is not a Christian. In other words, the approach needs to be somewhat coming from it like, I'm not a Christian. I want to learn about Christianity. I'm not going to church to do that. I'm not going to ask my pastor for that. For this study, I'm going straight into what does the text actually say. Right? That should be a noble task, but that's the most scary of all of them, because when you do that honestly, we have a lot to learn. Okay. All right, so this is not a trivial task, but it is a very good place to be. Thinking like an historian. Now, thinking like an historian would mean that you place your specific tradition, denominational beliefs, dogmatic beliefs of the gospel just on hold. Just press pause for 8 weeks, or at least for an hour a week. Just press pause. Try and come from a different angle. Whether your beliefs are right or wrong, of course you believe that they are right, otherwise you wouldn't believe them. It doesn't matter. Just press pause on them. And after that, you can put them on again, and you can put that hat back on again as before. We put the dogmatic hat on hold in order to be mesmerized by the plain reading of the Gospels. And I think this is the reason why I'm taking the guts, the time, and why I'm so passionate about this, because when I did this, I saw the gospel. It feels like I read the Gospels for the first time. And this is why the study is called Rediscovering the Beauty of the Gospels. Rediscovering the original beauty, that somehow we can jump back 2,000 years and we can free ourselves, even just for an hour a week, from the Christian traditions we've inherited, the things that have developed over time. And even as I say this, some of you might say, no, Frans, we believe exactly what the gospel says, and it'll only take me 4 minutes with anyone to show that you don't. We don't take them literally. We don't take them that seriously. We take them seriously, but we read them through the glasses of our tradition. We don't read the gospel like this. We read them through 2,000 years worth of interpretation, evolution of the ideas, and then of course all the baggage that comes with each one of our particular traditions, and so on. So, as an historian, we cannot give weight to the traditions that are not based in historical data, right? What we need to do is we need to concern ourselves with the text and what it actually tells us. And we're trying to come to the text not with a predisposed bias when we're busy with our inquiry. This is not fully attainable, as I said earlier on, but we're going to do our best in attempt to come from as much of a neutral position as is possible. If I can give you a quick example, a central concern for this study will be which one of the Gospels were written first, right? Now, the historical approach is not going to rely on the conclusions of, for instance, a 2nd century church father and his conclusions about who wrote the books 80 years earlier. We can't use that because we're not sure what he based his conclusions on. We're going to go straight back to the text and try and find out who copied from who, if anybody copied from anyone. The point is simply that the historical approach will look at the evidence within the Gospels to make these type of conclusions. We're not going to go to our church dominations theological statements on we believe the book of Matthew was written first, and then Luke, and then we're not going to be doing that. We're going to skip that, and we're going to go straight to Matthew and Luke, put them next to each other and say, is it possible that this guy copied from this guy? Is it possible that none of them copied from each other? What does the actual evidence in these books tell us? In other words, the historical approach prefers the data over opinion and tradition, and that's the basic. So the nice thing about using the university textbook is that it doesn't give preference to any particular Christian denomination or beliefs, or any particular religion for that matter. It wants to remain as impartial as possible to eliminate any particular religious bias in order to get to the heart of the matter. All right, so end of our little session here today. It's important that we keep an open mind if we're going into a study like this. And I want to say up front, there are going to be challenging issues, and you are going to be able to take the thought, think about it, and not necessarily say, yes, I accept it, but just put it aside if you're unsure about it. Okay, so one of the things we have in the New Testament is we have 4 Gospels, and this is often called the synoptic problem. And synoptic it means that they look the same. So the synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is not part of the synoptic Gospels because John is so very, very different. And this is one of the things we'll explore in the study. Why is John so different? How is it different? Why is it different? But the synoptics is the first 3 ones you find in your New Testament. They look a lot more like each other than what they look like John, right? So John is the odd guy out in the family. Now, people call this the synoptic problem. I like to call it the synoptic challenge. And what is the challenge? Well, the challenge is just ask a couple of simple questions. Why do we have 3 Gospels? We only need 1. We only need 1 true and accurate story of the life of Jesus. His life, his birth, his death, resurrection, and what happened after that. But we don't have 1. If we only had 1, we wouldn't have a challenge and we wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah.
Because we have 3, it's challenging. And why is it challenging? Well, it wouldn't have been a challenge if they all were exactly the same, but they're not exactly the same, and this is where the challenge comes. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are, although they are very similar, we can use the example like they are all 3 cars. The one is like a Ferrari, the one's a Volkswagen, and the other one might be a Mazda. So they all have 4 wheels, but the wheels, the diameters, the air pressures, the rim sizes, the engine size, the color of the car is very, very different. And this gives us a challenge because which one is that? Because as modern Christians, like, which one is the 100% accurate? And what we've just defaulted to as Christians, all 3 are 100% accurate and say exactly the same thing. Well, if that is what you believe and hold to, you don't have a synoptic problem or a challenge. But it only will take you about a week of reading them next to each other, lining up the events in order, chronological order, taking the stories that match up and reading them carefully to see what each of them say, to realize that they don't say exactly the same thing. They don't always follow the same chronology. Sometimes they say things that are very different, and this is a challenge for us. So normally the answer to a challenge like this is, yes, it's these 3 disciples, and they saw things differently, but they're all writing the 100% truth. And so in the past, people with that type of mindset said, well, let's just combine them and we'll have one gospel, put them all together, and then we have one gospel. But the reality is the church has preserved all 3 of the gospels because they are so unique. And one of the things we'll be dealing with in this study is the unique character of each one of these books. It becomes obvious to us later on that these writers they're writing from particular perspectives. They have intentions when they write. They are portraying Jesus in different ways. even if all three of these books were written by first-hand disciples, like first-hand knowledge, disciples that walk with Jesus, you would know that it's impossible for them to write the exact same account unless they've, of course, copied from each other. And let's assume for a moment that was the case. You have three disciples. Mark was not a disciple. Let's say he was. Three disciples writing their experience with Jesus. You'll know from today's world and your own experience that even if you were three people at the same meeting listening to the same person, you come up with different expectations, different perspectives, different and these perspectives are not only formed by the person you listen to, it's also formed by who you are as a person and what you've been through and how you see the world. And that's kind of what we do have, it seems, in the Gospels, is different angles on the life of Jesus. And this study is about differentiating between them, not pushing them together to say exactly the same thing, but to rediscover the individual beauty of these Gospels. All right. So essentially, we're going to put aside temporarily our traditions about the Gospels, and we're going to focus on each one of them individually. And we want to bring back their life and their beauty as an individual piece of literary art, each one of them. So, why do we have so many? I've already done this little thing here, but I want to use the example of I've never been a painter. I can appreciate colors. I love color. Most of us do. But if you had three beautiful colors in front of you, pink, green, and maybe a turquoise blue, each one of them for a different time of the day, time of year, you might like the one more than the other. As long as you keep them separate, they keep the individual beauty. But the moment you take those paints and you start mushing them together, you normally end up with like a brownish mess. Or not a mess, brown is a color. Some people you like brown, right?
Yeah.
Brown and light blue, baby blue.
Yeah.
Has it changed or not?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it has changed. Okay. Anyway, brown is a color. It's okay. But I think that this is what I did with the Gospels. I took the individual colors as a pastor. I was never educated in historical literary approaches. And that's kind of subconsciously smushed them together so that in my mind, it's just that brown gospel. And I've rediscovered that actually, no, it's not a brown gospel. It's a blue one and a turquoise one and it's a pink one. It's three different, they're distinct. One is warm, one is aggressive, one is relaxed. And so this is what this study is about. It's about saying, don't mush them together. Don't assume they say the same stuff.
Yeah.
Don't assume they experience Jesus in the exact same way. Don't assume that. Let's go see what they say. To give you an example, when it comes to Christmas, we've just gone through Christmas time, and most people have the nativity story as a brown combination in their head. You know, you got the shepherds, you got the wise men, they go to Egypt, Jesus circumcised in the temple, they're in Bethlehem, they go to Nazareth. One long, beautiful story. That's the brown version, guys, because in Luke, it's different. Luke doesn't have the wise men. Matthew doesn't have the shepherds. Luke doesn't have the trip to Egypt. And Matthew doesn't have the circumcision in the temple. They are different colors, but somehow we as Christians, because we don't really invest enough time in this type of inquiry, we just push them together and it's all brown to us. Now, what scholars do is they literally, this is all they do. Every day, this is their work. They go look to see what is the color of each of these. And we're just going to be doing a very introductory 8 hours of introduction time into what the scholarly world looks like and what the colors of these gospels actually. So that's my best way of trying to explain it. We want to give each writer back his voice. Because when you make a brown puddle, you lose the voice of Mark, you lose the voice of Luke, you lose the voice of Matthew. We want to know, what did Mark think about Jesus? What did Luke think about Jesus? What did Matthew? That's a more authentic place to approach Jesus from. And that also brings to light a more real Jesus, I think, to all of us. Okay. So, we want to study and try to give every writer his voice. And how would you do that? Well, you do this exactly, and this is where people get slightly uncomfortable, but you don't need to. We do this by highlighting the differences. That's how we get to. If me and Tori tell the same story of us walking down the promenade, we come home and we, each get a chance. I might be adding some details, like I saw 3 mountain bikes. She might leave that out completely. What does it tell you about me? I just bought a mountain bike. I'm interested in that. That's important to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so in essence, that's kind of what's going on. So you have to look at the differences in order to see the different colors. So this is where Christians sometimes, and I know me initially, you get a little bit uncomfortable because you realize there are some differences between the Gospels. Some are small and insignificant. Others are rather challenging to deal with. All right. So to end off, I want to give you a quick idea of what the course looks like, just in a very, very concentrated format. Number one, we're starting on Wednesday, the 31st of January. We're starting live at 7, but you can watch it anytime after that. It's in the Facebook group. Link is in the bottom. Click on there, accept the terms of the group. You'll be let in. It's a private group, so it's a safe space for everyone. There will be 8 sessions on Wednesday nights. There's a place I'll be sharing what I will do with some of the more difficult ideas is I'm going to diagram them and put them into diagrams so they're more easily understandable. I'm trying to do that as much as I can. Some of the portions are more a little bit technical than others. You just got to work through those hard portions, and you'll be rewarded in the end. All right.
1 hour?
It's 45 minutes from 7 o'clock to 7:45. I believe it's a great investment if you're serious about the Bible. So a very quick outline of the course. I don't have actually I do have it in front of me, but I just want to give you a quick outline so you kind of know what to expect from the course. The first 4 chapters, and it was the first 4 sessions, they're going to be more or less sessions per chapter, 1 session per chapter. They're going to be about the world of the New Testament. In other words, what did Christianity look like? We focus on Christian diversity. It's important. We focus on the canon of Scripture. We focus on some of the other writings that were there during that time. We're going to be focusing on more or less how did we get a gospel? How did it get to the place where someone was actually writing the stuff down? What is the process that historians envisage that was the high probability process for it coming to that place? We're also going to be talking about how the Christian canon developed. So these are things we'll be focusing in those first 4 chapters, together with the Roman Greco world. Jesus grew up as a Jew, but in the Roman Greco world. So we're going to touch on Roman Greco religion, Roman Greco literature. And so these first 4 chapters are designed to give you a fresh perspective. To give you a perspective, if you've never had one, or maybe it's a refresher for some of you, of what the world would have looked like, the religious literary world would have looked like back in the time of the writing of the Gospels. That's the first 4 chapters. Chapter 5 deals with the synoptic challenge. Like, how do modern scholars solve the problem of 3 Gospels, all different, but about the life of the same person? Do they believe one was first? Do they believe that one used another one? What is the scholarly consensus on what's written first, what's written second, who used what, and that helps us to move forward from there. Right, from section 6, we're literally going to be dealing in each chapter with each one of these Gospels. We're going to start with Mark, we're going to move to Matthew, to Luke, and to John, and we're going to be applying literary methods to them, simple literary methods. We'll be using nice, easy examples to bring and highlight again the approach, the intention, and the predisposition to some degree of each one of these writers. And I truly believe that this course will not only bring back the literary beauty of these Gospels, but also going to be able to inform you how to read them better, and also how to deal with the tensions between them. Yeah. Sometimes it looks like there's big differences between them. How do we deal with that? How do we explain that? That's the story, right? The whole thing. So we're looking forward to seeing you if you're willing. and you'd like to join us on this journey, you're very, very welcome. Next week back here, we're continuing with Corinthians, and that's going to carry on as normal, and it's going to run concurrently to the Wednesday nights for the study.
Awesome.
All right, great. Tori, thank you so much for sitting here all this time and listening.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week and have a great Sunday, guys.
Bye.
Cheers.